That is under 30 seconds. We're out before the snap. I gave good consumable information, and what I said made an impact, whether that be about an injury, whether that be about a human interest story, doesn't matter. But I got the facts out. I didn't mumble. It was there. We're out before the snap. We're sub 30 seconds. Everybody's happy. I'm not getting yelled at and talked back. That's the perfect hit to me. Couldn't ask for anything better.
Welcome into episode 7 of STAA's Next Level Sportscasting. I'm your host, Michael Watchering. We're pleased to be joined by ESPN Sideline Reporter, as well as VSiN host, Stormy Buonantony. Great to have you with us, Stormy. Thanks so much for the time. I want to start with this. If you would have told yourself when you were in college for the first time in San Diego State that you're where you're at now, what would you have said to younger Stormy?
Like, first of all, wouldn't believe it. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. But it's so funny looking back at those times when you're just like learning how to use an editor and putting a Sony 800 on your shoulder and just trying to figure it out. Obviously, the goal is to be working national games or at ESPN. Like, I think that's pie in the sky. If I was a student back then, I would be like, oh yeah, I want to work on ESPN, because who doesn't, right? But for that to be the reality is incredible to me, because there are so many stepping stones along the way, and I was very much so fully prepared for that. I'm like, okay, what town do I need to go move to? What do I have to go do to hustle, to have an opportunity to just be in this job and then get into the next job, and just where am I going to go? I'm going to live all over the country and do all of these little things. So I think if I were to talk to myself back then, she wouldn't believe it. She'd be very, very proud, which is a cool thing, I think, to be in a position now where I can reflect back on the last decade of my journey to be at the point that I'm at. But I would also tell her, keep pushing, right? Because I still have a lot of other goals that I would like to reach, and assignments I would like to have, and sports I would like to branch out into. So it's cool to reflect back on, but still a lot of work still to come.
You said, which town do you move to? And you've had a great career, and I want to go to one specific moment, though. You're working for the Mountain West, and you decide to go move to Charlotte, North Carolina. You're from the West Coast. You had really no connection to go to Charlotte. Why did you decide to go there, and how much did that pay off for you in the end?
Yeah, so first of all, something I do not recommend to people. I'm fortunate that it worked out for me. I moved for a boy, and we're married now, and it's a decade later, so it's all okay. But that was a very nerve-wracking point in my life, for sure. And I had been with the Mountain West for 3 years. I loved my job. I had the most fantastic mentor ever, who is still a great friend of mine, was at my wedding, Jesse Kurtz and Brian Tripp, and that whole crew over there treated me incredible and really helped build a foundation for what I do now. But I had kind of reached the limit on my role there, and they were ready I think, to bring in another young person who could be an intern that could transition into a full-time role and all of that. And my husband got a job in North Carolina, and he's originally from Wilmington, so he has family and a base out there. We did long distance for a year, and I bit the bullet and said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go move out there. And I did so without a job, without anything. But as you know, Charlotte is a great sports town, and kind of sneakily so. Yes, they have the NFL and NBA, but they have minor league baseball. They have minor league hockey. They have SEC network that is housed there. Raycom Sports, Tupelo Raycom, which now a big portion of that has become ACC network, and a lot of the people that work there now. But there's a lot of stuff going on. NASCAR, I didn't even mention, which is huge. So I felt like if I really put my head down and pitched myself enough to enough places and met enough people, that I could maybe get an opportunity doing something just to work. And I was fortunate enough very quickly. I got an editing job at NBC News Channel, which is essentially like a wire service where we're cutting and editing highlights and writing shot sheets for all of the NBC affiliates across the country for certain games. And so I was in the sports pod doing that from 7 p.m. to like 2 o'clock in the morning at times for that shift. And then I was looking for a job, trying to buy people coffee in the daytime and sending my reels to whoever I could and seeing if I could volunteer as tribute on a UNC Charlotte ESPN 3 broadcast and do that kind of stuff. And fortunately, after time and after bothering enough people, I started to create more and more opportunities for myself. And I say all the time, while yes, I don't recommend just picking up your life and moving for a relationship, especially when you're super career oriented, it really helped me to have just a spot on the map where I could isolate all of my focus and look at all of the places that were drivable for me for different colleges and different networks that maybe if I could freelance or do certain things, it helped me to have that more isolated viewpoint. And then also, like, I wouldn't be working for ESPN. I really don't think, had I not been there and met the wonderful Chris Farrow, who, by the way, is in Vegas right now, but his flight was delayed yesterday when we were supposed to get dinner. That he really took a chance on me as a coordinating producer at ESPN for an audition game after I had been in Charlotte for a while, and it paid off. And now I'm working multiple sports for ESPN, and I love it, and I'm so grateful for everything that city brought to me.
One word that's kicked around a ton is networking, but one word that I think was relevant for you at the beginning was taking a tour. I saw an interview a few years ago that you took some tours, and that's kind of how things started. But touring, relationship building, how important was that at the very beginning?
Yes, that is so funny. Legitimately, two jobs I ended up working. One for ESPN and the other for the Carolina Panthers is kind of like a broadcast associate digital reporter. Both started with me getting a tour of their facilities. With the Panthers, it was a crazy situation. They had very recently let go of somebody that was in the building, and I didn't know that at the time. I was just trying to get an informal conversation with somebody who was their executive producer at the time, and he ended up giving me a tour, and as we were walking, this informal conversation became a real interview, and then I had an audition a week later, and I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. And the same thing with ESPN. I had some mutual connections with Chris Farrow. We had a few emails back and forth, and he said, come on down, I'll give you a tour of SEC Network and we can talk a little bit. And I mean, I didn't get that audition game, mind you, until like another 6 months or so later because of the relationships, as you mentioned. And I so firmly believe in, I don't like the word networking. I like connections and maintaining relationships and building relationships. I think it's so important to think of it that way because you're not, even though of course everybody at the end of the day wants to work in this, right? And find an opportunity for themselves. Like the relationships that you build with these people, even if it's not a job, it's people who understand what you're going through, who maybe they otherwise would never have thought of you or known you existed for something that they hear from somebody else through the grapevine that they think you could be a fit for, right? And so I have really, really tried to, when I get to know people and meet people, like I like it's another part-time job. I feel like sometimes just taking the extra effort and sending an extra email to check in with somebody or a text message or talking about just something new that you've done or how their family is. And that's made, I think, a substantial difference in my career and like just having a more full life. Like I mentioned, Chris, who hasn't worked at ESPN for years and years, was in town this week for a concert and we're trying to go get dinner because we've maintained that relationship for so long and it matters and it means something. And I consider him and so many people in this industry that I just cold emailed or cold called one day as really good friends now.
There are a lot of people that look at your career and want to emulate it. It's around the time where students are going back to campus and college. What guidance would you give college students that want to reach the pinnacle of the career here in sportscasting that you have?
I would say, first of all, I mean, work really, really hard. And I know that like there's certain things that should go without saying, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes I will have conversations with young students that, and maybe they are the one in a million that gets at the national network right out of school, right? But most people, that's not the trajectory. And I hear from some people that like, oh, I don't want a one-man band or I don't want to do certain things. And I would say take every opportunity you have to do any of those things because it's just going to make you so much better as a reporter if and when you have that full-time reporter role. understanding what goes into making a hit for you and if something is possible or not possible from a camera operator or an editor. If you've done those roles, if you've sat in that chair, you can understand things a lot more and really appreciate what those other people are doing around you. And again, building more relationships too. But yes, I would say like learn everything you can, get your hands on everything you can, work really hard to know the nuts and bolts of how a broadcast works, and then also apply those same rules to what you're doing from a content perspective and becoming as knowledgeable as you can and having command of content, not having to look at a piece of paper and memorize something and try to regurgitate it, but really having that conversation with your play-by-play and analyst, or obviously the audience at home, or whatever person that you're interviewing. It's who wants to be the person that's looking down at their notes to ask the next question, right? Like you want to be having a conversation. And so work really, really hard and be really kind to people and be nice along the way. When you are working an event or like talking to a teacher and trying to get advice and guidance, to be your best self and make good first impressions and be nice to everybody that you work with. And those are two things that are completely within our control, is how much effort we put into something and how we treat people. There are a lot of things in this job, in this industry, that are out of our control, that someone needs to like you or something needs to fall the right way. But those two things are fully within your grasp that you can do. And something my dad always told me from the time I was very young, which I really feel like has been reflected in my career, is luck is when hard work meets opportunity. And I feel like I have been very lucky in a lot of areas of my life, but my dad has always been very great about saying, yeah, but you worked really hard to not mess up when you got that opportunity. So all of those things. That's a very long-winded, rambly way of saying it. Work hard and be nice to people. It'll be good.
Great summarization there. I want to hit on sideline preparation because I feel like it is maybe the least forgiving job in sportscasting, because you could work all week and there might be times where you're on air for 30 seconds just because of how the game's going. What does your sideline prep look like on a weekly basis?
That's a great point. So any aspiring sideline reporters, just be prepared for 95% of your sheet to not be used. Like that's just the nature of the game. And you have to be okay with that too, because I know sometimes we can get really attached to a story and be super excited about it. But if the game doesn't dictate it, the game doesn't dictate it. And that's what matters at the end of the day. The preparation is fun and it's challenging every week. And I think that's part of why I really like Sideline. And I imagine you too, as someone who does play-by-play and so many other things, that you're finding out your next assignment on the fly and you have to become an expert really quickly. And so I love reaching out to the sports information directors, to various teams, and finding out some under the radar stories or guys that haven't been talked about a lot, or players that coaches really like but that haven't had that moment yet, and trying to know the background of a lot of those players. I also always ask my play-by-play and analyst, what stands out to you most? Because if I know what they're going to be talking about, that's going to up my opportunities to be able to carry on a conversation with them and look for certain things on the sideline. And that's the biggest thing at the end of the day, is being the eyes and ears for the broadcast that nobody else can be. And so if I can take some of the nuggets from those guys, or that we hear from our coaches' calls, because we do production meetings, right? Head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator with both teams during the week. I do extra work to reach out to a handful of players from each team as well to have different things to contribute. But if I have a baseline of things that we should be looking for, and I can be on the sideline and take notice of a conversation and how it's following why something's happening or why something didn't happen. Or if a player, for example, coach said, we've really been challenging him to step up more as a leader and see if he can be a little bit more vocal, and I see him doing that, or I don't see him doing that, that can then become a conversation topic that we get into in the broadcast. But the most important things I do are on the field, and anything that I can find that we can apply to what's going on in the game, using my resources with trainers to get additional information when I can. And that's the one vantage point that no one else has but me. So how can I provide information there? And also behind the scenes too, which I don't feel like a lot of sideline reporters get enough credit because people just don't know about it. is that not that I'm like tooting my own horn, but like anyone that does it, because it's a thankless job typically, which is fine. But it's the stuff that you do on talkback to tell your producer that a camera should be here or that this is happening, we should follow up on this or we should check this out. And being eyes and ears, even if I'm not verbally reporting an injury update, a lot of times the reason the play-by-play knows and a camera is there on said player is because we helped direct that part of the broadcast as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's one of the inside things about this industry that a lot of casual viewers don't understand. You might not say anything on air, but something that you see really takes advantage of the opportunity that somebody in the booth or somebody, in the truck has. Regarding injuries, though, let's go to that because you can see something, but you don't want to speculate on it. Mm-hmm. What is your thought process about handling injuries?
Well, it's always ideal if you have a program that will give you an official update. I'm sure you've heard broadcasts all over the place where people are like, nothing official, but this is what I saw. And sometimes you have to give that caveat because some teams just don't give that information. But I am reporting the news, right? I'm only reporting the facts with which I see. I'm not gonna. We think it's a hamstring, like no, that's not proper. So yeah, for me, it is all about what I can see, and if I'm not there, because it's football field's big field, big place, big area to fill, right? And sometimes something happens on the other side of the field, and I'm not anywhere close, and you'll see just blonde hair in the wind sprinting to the other side to see what I can track down and try to talk to a trainer and see if anyone can say something to me. But sometimes you're just not in the right place at the right time. And so I can't give you an update in that instance, and I won't. And I think that's an important part of what we do is just sharing what you see and what is there and what is real, because you put it great. Like, you don't want to speculate. And I don't think you ever should, because the last thing you want to do is say something and report it as fact and have it not be when all is said and done.
And then the other thing I want to hit on is what you mentioned about play-by-play and analysts being on the same page, integrating with that. What can those in the booth do to ensure that their sideline reporter can be as successful as they can be?
I think the biggest thing that they can do, in addition to just having that open conversation in the pre-production times or before the game, whatever it is to listen to our report. And I've been so fortunate. I've had some great play-by-plays, and my current broadcast teammate is Dave Fleming, who, in addition to what he does for college football and college basketball, he's also the play-by-play for the San Francisco Giants, and he is beloved there for good reason because he's so good at what he does. But he's also an excellent listener, and I'm so grateful that when I finish a hit, it's never good stuff, Stormy, on to the next thing, or just ignores my report, right? And I hope that I do a good enough job as a reporter to warrant him to listen, right? And so that he can react properly in certain things. And I know there's so much other stuff that's going on for the booth. Sometimes a play-by-play broadcaster or analyst might not even mean to be dismissive to it because they're on talkback trying to get something set up with a producer next. But I know for me, it really helps, and it really makes me feel like I am a valuable addition to the broadcast when I do a report and there's a true reaction to it versus just on to the next thing.
Construct your perfect sideline hit. What does that look like?
Under 30 seconds. First and foremost. That is under 30 seconds. We're out before the snap. I gave good consumable information, and what I said made an impact, whether that be about an injury, whether that be about a human interest story, doesn't matter. But I got the facts out. I didn't mumble. It was there. We're out before the snap. We're sub 30 seconds. Everybody's happy. I'm not getting yelled at and talked back. That's the perfect hit to me. Couldn't ask for anything better.
It's not easy to practice, but your social media is great. You have a lot of really good stuff in there. But one that stuck out to me was you were doing a report. It might have been in College Station. And your back is to the field, trying to ensure that you're not going to get taken out. The band starts playing. You have to give this report. Your cameraman starts to walk away. You have to keep your focus on your report. How did you get comfortable being in those settings?
I don't know. I think it's just repetition, to be honest. Like, the more you do something, the more comfortable naturally you become over time. But the not getting hit thing, I can't believe I didn't add that to my must-haves and my perfect hit. Yes, do not be in a position where you can get hit on the field. I've seen too many of these videos, like stay behind the line of scrimmage. And a lot of our hits are coming out of a kickoff, right? Like make sure the play is over before you watch the field at all times as often as possible, right? Like, but also I remember the first time I did a hit and my cameraman just walked away and I was still midway through my hit. I didn't know that's how it happened. I didn't realize that they're like different cameramen operate different ways. Like they have another cutaway shot that they have to go get. So even though you're still talking, Stormy, who cares about you? We're gone. I didn't know that was how it worked. And I was so like, what is my hit over? But you can't say that. So you just keep going. And that's how it works. And I knew that from then on. And now I actually prefer it. I like knowing that I'm off camera and I can turn around to the field and I don't have to be as stuffy and good posture and looking at the camera the whole time. We can move on to the next and you can protect yourself. And that's a huge thing too for sideline reporters, how I mentioned getting out before the snap. Like I cannot have my head in my notes reading a hit word for word. And I don't write them that way. I write bullet points to if I need to reference a number, if I need to reference a specific quote that someone said to me, but always head up on the field and try to make sure that you're giving your play-by-play an opportunity to handle the play as it like that's their job. That's not my job. So that's very important to me is always be watching.
And then I think one of the hardest things that you have to do is ask the questions either at halftime or at the end of the game. How do you ensure that those questions aren't basic, but also give either the coach or the player something to actually talk about?
Yeah, it can be tricky sometimes, especially if the moment has passed for something earlier and debating in your head whether or not that's still an important question to ask in this moment or if we need to be more in the now. But I always just try to focus on what does the fan want to hear in this moment. So I always take myself back to that when I'm getting set for a halftime or a post-game hit. How am I best serving our audience? What do they want to know right now? And how can we're in our role, I'm not there to like get anybody, So how can I also best set up the person I'm speaking to get the best answer and not feel like I've made them uncomfortable? And that's a lot of things to do while someone's also talking in your head a little bit and doing other things. But I'll also say that the play-by-play, you guys do such a great job of setting the scene for something by the time it gets tossed down to me. So just like I ask and I hope that the play-by-play is listening to my hit to react off the back end. That's part of my job too, is to be listening to them as a coach or a player is walking up to me to naturally carry that flow of conversation as often as possible too, to kind of put a period on the question that they're asking. How can we answer on the field the question that they've been asking in the booth? So that's the way I try to think of it.
What is it?
And one last thing, sorry. Which is ironic from somebody who's rambling so much today, but the shorter, the better. The more opportunity you can have for the person to be talking instead of you is always going to be better.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's a typical game day look like for you? I mean, if you want to pick a specific game that sticks out to you, you can do that. But what does a typical game day look like for a sideline reporter?
Sure. Well, mine is a little bit more unique, I would say, than most people on a Saturday because I often do the West Coast evening game. So I feel very lucky that during the day I get extra time to finish my notes. I get to watch some games. So I'm not as rushed or stressed in the morning as some other people that have a very early kickoff. But I do like that. I watch Gameday. I wrap up my notes. We'll do our final production meeting, talking through what our hope for the open is going to be. And that's a Zoom with our producer, director, play-by-play analyst, myself, graphics, some other folks that'll be chiming, our RC who coordinates a lot of different things, but not chief among them, but among them is making sure that we are at the game at a certain time and we know where to go once we're at the stadium and all of those things. So that's always a very, very valuable meeting. Although, 90% of the time, the open goes out the window. The game before us goes long and our window is cut and we open on another network. Nobody sees. So a lot of planning goes into sometimes things that we don't end up ever doing. Once I get to the field, though, on game day, I do a handful of things. I always do a lap around the field to make sure there's like my microphone works everywhere that it's supposed to work. So myself and the A2 will go do that together. I will, if there's something that I need to track down or ask a coach about, pre-padded warm up, I'll try to track that person down and ask those questions. I'm also making sure everybody that is supposed to be there is there, because I have had games where that has not been the case. I did a game, I did an Oregon game years ago where I remember getting to the field and I asked the sweet SID, who's wonderful to me, like, oh, any changes from the other day? It's like, no, I think we should be good. And then their starting center was in street clothes, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not great. And then their offensive coordinator was at the hospital. Okay, that's a change also. But I understand, because oftentimes certain coaches don't want information out there before kickoff, and that's fair. But that's then when my job becomes that much more valuable, right? Because I do have my little pregame checklist of things that I do. I make sure I know where the nearest hospital is in case something terrible, which we always hope never happens. So we know where this player is likely to be taken. I have my checklist to make sure that all of the players are there who are supposed to. If somebody is dealing with something, I have those specific injuries already written down so I can look in pregame to see, does he have tape on this? Is he wearing a brace? Does he have a something? So finding out all of that information. And in that case, I went from like having a very, like, I don't want to say a meh open report, but it was more of like a feel good open report to a very timely news item of like, this is big news. Like, this, one of their very important core pieces on their offensive line is not available today. And the typical play caller for this game is not, and finding out who was going to be calling plays for the game. So I ended up having a very meaty, juicy report that day when I walked into it being like, oh, it's a beautiful day and everything's fine. So my checklist is always very, very important too.
Play-by-play broadcasters have spotting boards. It sounds like you might have a legal pad, or what is your typical, what do you keep in front of you?
Similar vibe, but it's funny you say that, because yes, this is like my little go-to. But I create my own document. I have a spotter chart like a lot of play-by-play will have, but it's much more condensed. It's basically just like name, number, and that's what I put any injury information on so that I can track and have my 2D visual for me should someone go down and who's supposed to fill that void through our conversations earlier in the week. And then I have another one with just like key nuggets for certain players that I've talked to during the week, or that I uncovered information about, or that I'm curious about. I have like little pregame questions that I need to answer for myself. But it's a little like it's a sideline version, I feel like, of what you guys do, where I have whoever's on the field on my same sheet. So I'll have like offense on one side, defense on the other, and like my primary notes written out that way.
I like it. I like it.
There's probably too many pieces of paper, though. I need to rein it in.
Yeah, I always have like 20 pieces with me, and I use like one. So I just feel like I need it, though. You have to have that extra
like you
piece.
never know. And that's the thing about sideline too, and play-by-play. It's like you never know what you're gonna need.
Yes.
So I just want to be prepared for any situation. But there is such a thing as over-prepared probably too.
There's that one game a decade. You needed that one piece of paper,
Yes.
and you better
Yes.
have it with you. You better have it with you.
Sorry. And I just would say too, another like big thing in as far as prep goes, is like backup quarterbacks. Actually, 3 deep in the quarterback room has come up in my career a handful of times. So oftentimes play-by-play will focus on the starting quarterback and backup quarterback and not have much on the third string quarterback, which is normal. Most people wouldn't. But if you can get that information for yourself, and I would say same thing for like if there's a star running back or something, just knowing information about the people that are backing them up should something bad happen. That's another great way to just be prepared for the moment.
I want to leave you with this. You have had such a successful career. You've done so many great things. You've been able to work in your hometown for the Vegas Golden Knights. How do you balance, though, the competitor in you that wants to reach this pinnacle, that wants to achieve things, that wants to do more, but also keep the same perspective that you're currently living a dream that you might have had 5 or 10 years ago?
I am very, very appreciative of just how things have turned out genuinely, like whether it be, as you mentioned, ESPN or hockey in Vegas or the sports betting network that I work for, VSiN here in town, that people have been willing to give me an opportunity, and I feel like it is my job to prove them right, and make sure that they made the right decision in believing in me and my work ethic and what I do. And so I really try to live up to that as much as possible and be a good role model to little girls that want to do this kind of thing. It's so important to set a good example and show that like women and girls, you can do this. You can be in this industry and you can be taken seriously and do a good job and be more than what you look like, and all of those types of things I think are super important. But perspective wise, I think I used to have a mindset of what's the next thing all the time. And like I mentioned off the very top, like I still want to continue to grow and do other things and develop, but that's not me saying I'm ever unhappy in what I'm doing and I want to leave it to then go do this. Whereas I think when I was younger and early on in my career, I was always comparing myself to other people. I'm like, how old is she? And what is she doing? And like, how did they get that opportunity? I like, that's never on a job board. I never saw that job available. And like, you do this mental gymnastics all the time about like, why am I not where other people are? And I think you are doing your current job a major disservice if you have that mindset. And if you're doing that a disservice, you're never going to develop properly in that role to be ready then for that next opportunity. So I have really just focused on embracing the moment and working as hard as humanly possible on whatever project is in front of me and giving my best in what I'm doing and not letting that outside noise or like people. I celebrate my friends that get good opportunities versus wondering like, oh, why didn't I get that? And I think that's super important. And I think especially when you're young and you're on Instagram and you're on social media and you're seeing all of this stuff, you might be 23 seeing somebody that's 35 doing that. Like you got time. Get good at what you're doing, develop those relationships like we talked about, work really hard. That's what's going to make you ready and like better at what you do. So I don't view it as competitive anymore. I think I might have at one point, but like I've really matured. But I think growth is important, and the best way to grow in your emotional intelligence is, I think a big part of that is just focusing on what you're doing now and being the best you can at it.
Stormy, thanks so much for the time. We look forward to watching you this college football season.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Our thanks to Stormy Buonantony, our guest here on episode 7 of STAA's Next Level Sportscasting.